when I first arrived, I was in an office, a separate office to the coaching staff, and then in my second year, I was moved into the office after that 10 games. Especially North America, there's a big emphasis on like analytics and how that's built out within clubs. We got to go home every 2 weeks or whatever and spend a day in quarantine, and then we had to fly. We couldn't train there. We had to fly back to the US. We have the beach and the weather, which you can't complain about. Yeah, we lost them in the playoffs in the second round of the playoffs.
And that was like a late goal as well, was it?
Yeah, it was late.
Sounds like you've not got over that yet, sounds.
Okay, so as you can tell from the introduction, it's time to welcome Sam Green to the channel. So Sam is all the way over in Los Angeles, currently working with the LA Galaxy in their analysis department. So Sam is actually originally from the UK, and he actually went to the same university as me, Sheffield Hallam. So he did actually work for a couple of clubs in the UK, including the likes of Rochdale, Barnsley, West Brom and Albion, but obviously then made the move over to the MLS. So LA Galaxy is in fact the second club he's worked with over in the MLS, so we're kind of keen to chat about that, but also just keen to speak about what the MLS is like in general, kind of what he gets up to day to day, and also how he kind of sees the American national team's chances in this current World Cup, but also looking forward to the 2026 World Cup also, which is obviously hosted in the USA. So without further ado, let's get into the chat with Sam. Hello Sam, welcome to the channel. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
All good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good. No, appreciate you jumping on. Obviously got a lot to go through, lots of questions. I did give a quick intro before the video started, Sam, but what I always do is pass it on to the guest in terms of, for those that don't know who are you, Sam, and what are you currently doing at the moment in terms of your job?
So I'm Sam Green. I'm currently head of analysis at LA Galaxy. So day to day, I work kind of with the first team, pre-game, opposition analysis, match day, and then kind of post game, and then overseeing kind of the analysis department through the club. So from the first team to our second team and through the academy, and trying to build that department out. Prior to that, I was still in the MLS with the same coaching staff over in Toronto for two years. And then prior to that, I was in the UK with West Brom and Chelsea, and a couple of internships along the way.
Yeah, perfect. So you're actually the second MLS analyst I've had on the channel. So I don't know if you're obviously the Western Conference. I spoke to Scott, who's at Cincinnati, who's also another kind of UK analyst that's gone over there and kind of moved to the MLS. But it's interesting to hear his thoughts, so kind of see what you kind of think to some of the similar questions as well. So you mentioned there, obviously you were at Rochdale and stuff. So quickly, just before we get into the nitty gritty of the Galaxy stuff, like we'll go back to the start, Sam, if it's okay, in terms of just a quick intro in terms of how you got into analysis and what point did that kind of trigger in your mind that would be a career for you? Because before we started recording, actually, we discovered that we actually went to the same university. So you went to Sheffield Hallam Uni, you did a sports science kind of degree. Did you do a master's, or was that the first time you were introduced to analysis? Just kind of give us a bit of a background on that.
It was more, to be honest, doing sports science, it wasn't exactly specific something that I wanted to get into in terms of analysis. It was more something that I was kind of made aware of going into like my third year. I think there was a module available that I took interest in. Then from there, like you said, I picked up the internship at Rochdale with Dan Bradley, and I did like my 6-week placement there as well during that time. So I was kind of going at weekends prior to that, and then I did like 6 weeks full time, and then moved into the position at Barnsley. That kind of came off that, and then finished university and went from there. I did do a master's in sports performance analysis whilst I was at West Brom, in full-time work at the University of Worcester, which was really good.
Yeah, cool. So then, yeah, I'm sure you've done, so some of that was obviously unpaid stuff as well, and Sam, so the Rochdale would have been unpaid at the start at least. Was Barnsley unpaid as well, or was that your first kind of paid?
Yeah, so I actually got expenses in that role, which felt like quite a big deal at the time. I know it was probably a little bit of a different time then. I think it was still obviously not as common to get any kind of money going into a position like that, but it obviously helped when I was at university. And then after university, the positions were then paid.
Yeah. Who were you at Barnsley, Sam? Who else was analyst there? Can you remember?
Um,
Trying to think back because obviously that's going back a long time. Because all
it was Alex. I can't
Bailey,
remember his last name.
Alex Bailey.
Maybe he went to Villa. He went to Villa after Barnsley.
Oh no, maybe not then. No, maybe not him.
I was only there for a pretty limited time, to be honest.
Yeah. So
Kind of my third year.
yeah, cool. And then you've also got on your LinkedIn profile, you did a bit at Chelsea as well, and then obviously you mentioned West Brom. So all of the roles there in terms of so yeah, Rochdale, Barnsley, Chelsea, West Brom, all academy based. So was that by choice, or was that just how it fell and your roles were in academy?
The Rochdale role was kind of academy, but like I said, when I did that 6-week placement, it was with the first team and I helped out. So I do like under 18s game on a Saturday morning and go down to the stadium and help down with the first team just with filming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The stuff after university, Chelsea was predominantly with the under 18s and some of the academy, and that was kind of more of a part-time role at the weekends and maybe a day in the week. I used to drive down. I used to, at the time as well, I was working in like I was working for Leicester City in the community, so I was going and doing PE lessons. I worked in a bar and I worked at Chelsea, so I was kind of balancing those three things before I got the full-time role at West Brom.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then West Brom, you were there for over a year, it says on your profile. So before we kind of get to the move over to Toronto initially then, so because you've also got coaching qualifications as well, Sam. So were they taken before you went away, or when did you kind of, and was that a conscious decision for you to say, you know, I think this will help me in my analysis career, or were you also kind of potentially going down the coaching route as well at that point?
I always thought I was always kind of into coaching in some capacity. I did like a grassroots team for a period whilst I was at university, and that's when I did my level 2. And then after that, I did like the FA youth modules. That was kind of when that period was, they kind of took off. So I got to my third one in that. And then recently, last year, I did my B license with the Welsh FA.
Yeah.
I think in analysis, I think we're kind of limited as to the hand qualifications that we can hold, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't like, if you look at almost support staff around football, so like a physio or an athletic trainer, as they say in North America, they have a hard qualification. This is their profession. This is what they do.
Yeah.
It's the same with like strength and conditioning or a sports scientist. They have set qualifications along their almost career pathway. That's like, oh, now you get this one, now you get that one. I think in analysis, the only real one that we can do, and obviously it's very closely linked, is kind of the coaching qualifications.
Yeah. And how do you feel? I mean, I presume you feel that that's kind of benefited your career in terms of maybe gaining trust with the actual other coaches as well. I mean, how do you feel that? How important would you say a coaching qualification is for somebody that is looking to get into analysis?
I think it is. I think it is very important. I think like the football knowledge side of things, I think the technical skills that you can learn, so like the filming, the coding, all that kind of stuff, is like anyone could probably turn a hand to that. It's how you identify things, how you spot trends, how you almost utilize your knowledge, and then obviously hopefully that in turn kind of builds the trust with the coaches if you're giving them information that's actually something that they would spot, for example.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously on the coaching badges, the coaches that are coming through, they obviously it's not all analysis, but they do dabble in, and there's analysis sections within the coaching, curriculum for them as well. So they have a somewhat of a knowledge on analysis. So I think the analysts should kind of cross over as well towards the coaching side of things. So in terms of the difference between academy and first team, Sam, again, because a lot of people that watch this channel are, maybe aspiring analysts, and they're maybe just getting their first step into, and a lot of people do start off in an academy role rather than a first team. Obviously not always the case, but what would you say to those kind of people are the main differences between, being an academy analyst to a first team?
I think obviously probably the main difference in the role is the amount of opposition work that you do. I know later on in an academy is opposition based to a degree. and it obviously the emphasis is a little bit different in terms of development and winning games. Like ultimately, if you don't win games at the first team level, there's potential you could lose your job, which is kind of the harsh reality of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously the main differences are probably those two. But there's obviously still a lot of skills that you learn and like best practices from academy that if you are then put into a first team environment, I think is still like it may be turned up in terms of the intensity of the environment, all that kind of stuff for the reasons that I just said. But I think that like the basic fundamentals are there from what you do with the academy.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so right, so you've been. We'll say we'll go on to the Toronto move then, Sam. Really, so you know, was that always, for your perspective, were you always wanting to go abroad? Was it just something that you seen and thought, actually, I might have a, you know, that sounds interesting, or was it always a kind of in your mind to kind of use your job to kind of see a bit of the world?
It wasn't always something that I kind of aspired to. It wasn't something I'd ever ruled out, to be honest. It was like you said, it was an opportunity that came up that I was interested in. It was probably at the right time in terms of I don't know, progressing from academy football into a first team environment. And like you said, obviously the opportunity to go and live in another country and travel a little bit was also appealing. So I think timing wise, it came at a good time where, like you said, it just presented itself and it was obviously meant to be.
Yeah, sure. So and then you went. Did you go over there on your own, Sam, initially? Or did you have a partner or any?
My girlfriend, she came over after a few months. She came with me,
Okay.
and my wife now is with me in the US.
Yeah, cool. So and then when you went over to Toronto, did you know anyone at the club at that point, or was it you were just going in totally?
No, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone. No, they were obviously at a period where I think they'd been together for like since 2016, and I joined in maybe 2015. I joined in 2019, the end of 2019, and then in 2021, obviously we made the move across, and I think there was 7 members of staff who came with the head coach.
Oh, okay.
To a Galaxy now.
Yeah. So we will get onto that. So in terms of when you started at Toronto, then Sam, what did that department look like? Were you going into a existing analysis department? Were you a big part? Did you have chance to make changes and stuff like that?
I literally replaced one person. There was no other kind of analysis within the club. The plan was to build out the department to have someone working with the academy, maybe with the second team. Again, similar to what we have now. But it was 2019, the end of 2019 season hit. We got 10 most cup final. It was the off season. We played one game and then it was COVID. So kind of my time in Toronto never really, due to COVID and everything, we obviously continued playing games and all that stuff, but it was never probably as normal as when I first arrived. But like I said, that was always the plan, to kind of build out the department and try and get people in those positions to build it out. The academy coaches were always pretty good. They could kind of do their own thing. And we did get to a period where we had I think we had 2 or 3 interns in filming games on a very part-time basis, paid positions. But yeah, like I said, it never really took off in the sense of recruiting a full-time member of staff or anything like that.
And what are the academies like over there, Sam? Is it similar to UK? I mean, does every team in the MLS have a similar structure, or is it just dependent?
Very similar. I don't think they quite have as many teams. A lot of academy teams here start at like 12s, and then they'll have a pre-academy setup almost. I know at home it would be like start at 9s with a pre-academy setup. Before that, even younger. But I think it is getting built out, and now there's like an initiative with like MLS Next, where kind of it's looking more like the Premier League 2 at home, and like the games programs of obviously trying to build it out, because here geographically it's a lot more difficult to have like a games program where you can go and play against other high level academies in your area. And I know that's probably an issue that we still have, is obviously we still play local teams, and don't get me wrong, some of the local teams are well set up and they have a good infrastructure. They almost have an academy themselves. But there's probably only so far that you can go that's why at the minute the academies play, like they'll travel and they'll play a lot of tournaments, or they'll travel to, like last weekend they travelled to Seattle, and the 15s and the 17s played against Seattle.
Yeah.
Which is a 3-hour flight.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of traveling that goes on. I mean, when you first kind of got there and got settled in, Sam, like analysts that are listening might obviously, you move from one club to another club in England. There are some differences, but a lot of the time it's just kind of the similar thing. Did you find that there was much difference of your actual job when you got over there? Was there much culture differences, like shock for you to think, actually, oh, you do it like this over here, or or was it easy, was it harder? Just kind of the differences really that you found going into that job first, and in Toronto.
I don't think there was particularly massive differences. I think when you go into, especially when you go into a new job or a completely different environment like that, I think you have to take time to be aware of what's going on around you and kind of take it all in, and the dynamics of how the staff work and all that kind of stuff, without trying to change everything or trying to put your own stamp on stuff or whatever. Just figuring out like where you sit, where your role kind of sits within it. And although they had someone prior to me, I still think, like I said, with it only being one person, I still think they were maybe figuring out like how that role exactly looked. And how I kind of interacted with the coaches. So when I first arrived, I was in an office, a separate office to the coaching staff, and then in my second year, I was moved into the office after that 10 games. So I think the dynamic and maybe them understanding like how they can utilize me, and the group of coaching staff, again, the same coaching staff I work with now, they're all very like competent, so they've always been able to do their own thing. It was more like trying to probably figure out like individual requests of like, oh, could we do this? Could we do that? Like what, again, like how they could utilize me best, I suppose.
Yeah. So you touched upon it then. So obviously the club you're now, obviously Galaxy, is all of the same people that you were with Toronto. Were they so when you started at Toronto, it was them same people then? So you never really had any managerial change or anything while you've been over there?
No, so it was the same head coach, and then 3 assistant coaches moved across: head of performance, sports scientist, and then the goalkeeper coach didn't. There's a different goalkeeper coach now, but yeah, like you said, the same core group of staff is with us now from Toronto to the Galaxy.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, and then was that so? Obviously, when the manager left and went over to Galaxy, did you go straight? Were you all the guys went at the same time, or was it a case of waiting until he got settled and then you went?
Yeah, no, we all went at the same time. So for the start of the 2021 season.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was from about the period of November, December time till the start of the next season. Kind of we all moved across.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so and I mean, talk us through that then, Sam. I mean, you've gone from within a few years from Rochdale to rubbing the stars in LA. So what's it like in LA? What's it like to live there? What's the culture like, and just kind of how is it different to what you had in the UK?
It was kind of strange, the move in some regards. Like I said, it's the same coaching staff. We obviously progressed with how we operate, but how we had it in the end in Toronto is probably still very similar to how we operate now.
Yeah.
So it was almost the same job in a different, obviously with different players, different support staff around the building, different people to manage, or have relationships with kind of upstairs and senior people at the club. But the day-to-day, the way we operate in terms of what means we deliver and what analysis the coaches need and all that kind of stuff is still very similar. And then obviously, like away from work, living in LA is a different experience to living in Toronto. Toronto is like a small city, like everything's close. LA is a big space.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the beach, and the weather, which you can't complain about. Which is you had the weather in Toronto, but only for like 3 months of the year. The rest of the year was pretty cold. But I suppose we got used to that.
Yeah, nice, very nice. So, and then I mean, forgive me because I don't follow the MLS too much. So when you just obviously done a little bit of research beforehand, so when you kind of went over to the Galaxy, was that in some interviews it was seen as a kind of, were they in a bit of a rebuilding phase, would you say, at that point? Like, because a few years before, didn't they finish kind of bottom of the conference? It was sort of 2017-ish, obviously before you went. So moving from Toronto to LA, was it a kind of a step? How was that seen? I mean, in terms of where were Toronto in the kind of standings to where Galaxy were when you went there?
Well, Toronto, like I said, we got to the final in 2019, and then we just missed out on Supporters' Shield in 2020, which was obviously kind of a different season with COVID and all that kind of stuff, and traveling. And in Toronto as well, we obviously, because we were in Canada, we couldn't play games in Canada because the border was closed. So we relocated to the States for 3 months, which was a challenge. We got to go home every 2 weeks or whatever and spend a day in quarantine, and then we had to fly. We couldn't train there. We had to fly back to the US in Connecticut and train, and then we played at Hartford, Connecticut, an American football stadium. But we reached it, I think, in Toronto, and obviously I was only there for a short period of like Greg and the staff's kind of journey that they took from 2015. I was only there for like a short period of that kind of that period, but it was I think it was a similar process project that went on in Toronto. Like it was a 6-7 year project that was not necessarily a rebuild project, but like Greg almost oversees the whole club, so he takes interest in the academy and the structure of the club and how it looks and all that kind of stuff in terms of off the pitch as well as like what goes on the pitch. So I think Galaxy showing faith in him and allowing him to bring like 6-7 members of staff is pretty unheard of. And I think, like I said, in terms of a rebuild and building something sustainable for the future, I think that was like obviously the goal here, and hopefully in the last 2 years we've made some good progress, obviously in terms of what we're doing on the pitch, but then like I said, the infrastructure, building out the academy and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the second team as well, and so who does? I mean, maybe a daft question, but who does the second? Is that just like the reserve team in terms of, will they play other second teams, or how does that kind of work?
So yeah, this season they were in the USL, which is like is separate to the MLS. It's not second tier. It's a separate professional league in the US. So we had Galaxy 2 in that. Next season it's moving over to the MLS Next Pro. So it's more of a younger age group, but you can play overage players in it again. But that'll be more made up of like MLS second teams almost, rather than at the minute it's a few MLS second teams against like Sacramento Republic or San Diego, for example, like first teams at clubs. So yeah, that's kind of the plan with the second team.
Yeah. Okay. So, what does your department look like now, Sam? And not just analysts. I mean, what kind of coaches are you having working relationships with? Who do you kind of sit in the office with, and how does that day to day look from a perspective of kind of working together, really?
So day to day, it's one of the assistant coaches, Jason Bent. He does a lot of the opposition analysis. So between us, we'll usually watch 3 games. We'll organise it. I'll illustrate it, put the meeting together, and then he'll present it to the players. And then other than that, with the other coaches, it's more like how, like I said, talked about earlier, kind of any needs they have, or again, opposition, post-match kind of stuff. And then they can usually bring forward clips that they want to share, or even head coach Greg, he can almost create his own clips that he needs. So it's a case of combining everyone's, the stuff I have, the stuff he has, stuff the assistant coaches have, and then trying to pull that together in a meeting for the players. So obviously I work with Greg pretty closely on what messages he wants to get across to the meeting, what issues we want to highlight, what things we did well.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned that the coaches are taking a hand, obviously they're having a hand in the analysis process. So are you on paper as an analyst? Are you the only analyst at the club then, and obviously the coaches chip in as well?
So no, we have Grant Hayward. He's with the second team at the minute. So he's with like I said, the USL team going into the MLS Next Pro, and we currently have an intern from USC who's working with the with the academy a couple of afternoons a week, just on filming, coding some games. And like I said earlier, hopefully, potentially in the future, that will be a full-time position. And then we'll see from there how else we could potentially build out the department.
Yeah, cool. And then, so Sam, just are you able to kind of give us an example, kind of standard week? What would a week look like in your role then, in terms of what day do you play on mostly? What during the season?
We usually play on Saturdays or Sundays.
Yeah.
So if we play at home or away, if we play at home, we usually do like a recovery session on a Sunday, and we'll have Mondays off. We usually go like 4 days leading to a game.
Yeah.
If we play an away and we can get back that night, depending on what time we get back, depends on whether we're in the next day, or if it's an East Coast, for example, we might stay the night after the game and then fly back on the Sunday, off on the Monday. So we usually do like 4-day building.
Yeah.
And then obviously after the game, prior to the game is probably when I've started watching the next team that we're playing against.
Yeah.
After the game would be a process of kind of breaking down our game plan, whether it worked, what we should have done better, all that kind of stuff, ready to show on. We'll come back in Tuesday. We'll probably talk through the game and what we want to get out of kind of the messaging. I usually stay in on that day. I haven't been going out to film train on the first day back, just because it's usually a day where the players are getting going again, and it's not necessarily a particularly tactical day. It's more just kind of getting everyone turned around. There might be some players stay inside to recover, some of the older players or players that have played a lot of minutes. And then on the Wednesday, so like a -3, that's when we'll go over the game, kind of, like I said, talk through the previous game. I'd film training on that day. -2 would be when we show the opposition. We'd usually do either 11v11 on the -3, probably.
Yeah.
-2 would be more of like a functional day, because we're bringing it down a little bit in terms of what we've done. -1, we don't usually do a meeting. The only thing we might show is maybe some stuff from that 11v11, in preparation for very little that we do outside, like I said, the day before a game. And then on a match day, we might show something in the hotel before. We might show something in the changing room before the game. When we get the team, Greg will obviously talk through their team. If there's anything that we think's abnormal or anything that we weren't expecting, we might show something based on that, if we have almost a plan B for the game.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned obviously the one time you said you sometimes don't film training the day after a game potentially, but do the majority of training sessions get filmed then? Is that what you're kind of doing mostly?
We normally do, yeah. Especially -3, -2. Like I said, -3 is usually the 11v11, so that gets used a lot. And well, it always gets used by the coaches. It's again, then what we show to the players, obviously they always have access to it. But it might not even be a meeting. We might just show something in the changing room on loop on a TV, to reinforce some stuff.
Yeah. So again, one question I do like to ask is kind of how much of it gets fed to the players. Obviously, you've got a lot going on with all of the training getting filmed, obviously all of the reports that you're doing, but you don't want to kind of overload the players, I'm sure. So, is it kind of, obviously they've got access to come to you as and when they want, but do they just kind of, will they get the pre-match meeting and that's about it, and then maybe a debrief? How does it work in terms of feeding content down to the players?
Yeah, they're probably the main two in the week. So like the game review and then the opposition stuff. There'll be always stuff available to them. So like opposition clips on teams that we're playing against, like their right winger, if our left back wants to watch some clips of him. And then again, the coaches, they do, if they need to show stuff to players, they can just show individuals, pull individuals. Some players seek it out, some players don't. I'd imagine from what I've seen, it's like that in most places. Some players want to engage with it, some don't, which is fine. But yeah, we try and keep the meeting short. Obviously, we don't want to be in the meeting room every day, because that usually affects the the time of training. We normally train a little bit later if we show some stuff in a meeting before. And here it's not particularly boiling. Like it's not like Texas hot, but it can get pretty hot in Carson where we train. So it's something that we're always aware of, and using, like I said, the different ways. So whether it's a meeting, an individual, whether we show stuff on the TVs in the changing rooms, we've got a TV outside now, so we're starting to figure out how we utilize that. Like I said, it makes us a little bit more efficient if we can just show 2 clips before training. It's not the whole process again, everyone in the meeting room and not coming back training, all that kind of stuff. So it's trying to find a balance, and like I said, you don't want to be necessarily meeting every single day because the players probably don't like that.
Yeah, definitely. So you touched a little bit on match day, Sam. So can you going to go a little bit more detail on that? So what is your role on match day? Are you filming, or are you taking a feed? Are you live coding? Are you going down at half time? Kind of what kind of does that look like on a typical match day?
Yeah, so on a match day, I film and live code upstairs, home and away. Coaching staff have a live feed on the iPad on the bench.
Yeah,
I'm on the phone to the coach that's using the iPad. So during the game, we'll obviously, if I see anything, I'll tell him. I have been sitting with a coach recently who's been moved up to the first team, Johan Dame. He was the second team coach. He's moved up with us, so he's been upstairs, which has been great. To have another set of eyes up with me, to be honest. And then we're between the 3 of us. We'll figure out like what the themes have been in that half. We'll have maybe 2 clips ready to go at half time. So I'll run down. We'll stick them in all guys. I'll run down.
Yeah.
We'll meet with the coaching staff. Meet with Greg, head coach. He'll say what he needs to say. The coach will say what he needs to say, and then we'll show him the 2 clips that we have. If he says, "Yeah, let's go," we'll show them. We travel with a TV to away games, like in a box, because that away changing rooms are supposed to have TVs, but they're usually small or around the corner, or sometimes you're playing in a football stadium, sometimes it's a baseball stadium. It's like you're not sure what it's going to get, what you're going to get in there, and obviously it's never a massive TV in a particularly accessible place. So having the TV in the box is great because we can wheel it around and move it, whatever. And then if we need to show anything, it's there, it's ready to go. So we'll pull players over. So then at half time we have the game on my laptop and we have it on an iPad as well. So we can be distributed around to show people stuff individually or in groups or whatever if anyone wants to see anything.
Yeah, nice. So then just in general then, Sam, in terms of the mixture of video and data, so would you class yourself as, I mean, how much of a role does data play? Is that something that you're looking to kind of improve upon? Do you think that's growing within the club? Obviously there's only so much you can do, I suppose, day to day, but what role do you see data playing in the preparation to games and things like recruitment, etc.?
Yeah, we do use data. We're kind of looking again, maybe infrastructurally. I think especially North America, there's a big emphasis on like analytics and how that's built out within clubs. So typically within a club, like I said, in North American sport, there is usually an analytics department, which is kind of separate to the video. So they then work with the different departments in the club. So like recruitment, sports science, and like the technical side. So I think that going forward, that's kind of the direction we want to go. But how we've used it since we've been here is we use StatsBomb. We're starting to use Power BI to kind of visualize all of our stuff. So I'm trying to automate as much as I can. There's still an element of searching through stuff. And we work with a French company called Sports Dynamics as well. They've been really good. So they make use of the second spectrum tracking data. And they have like their own metrics, which are like space creation, line breaking passes in behind, non-chosen. And they give you the flexibility to be able to make your own metrics. So anything that we want to look at, we can then tell them these are the metrics we want to build out, and then we can see the data on their online platform. We're starting to get it to BI. And they give us an XML so we can see all these instances as well after a game, which is really useful.
Nice. What can you, for those that don't know then, Sam, what can you just give a bit of a description what actually Power BI is? What does it do, and what kind of benefits does it give you?
So it's like a visualization software similar to, it's the same as Tableau effectively.
Yeah.
It allows you to take a big data source and then visualize basically all the reporting that has been done manually over years on PowerPoint and Keynote could potentially be done through a visualization software like Power BI or Tableau. So you can have everything set. You can just change the team, and the tables or the graphics or whatever should populate based on the things that you built. It's not as straightforward as that, but it obviously, hopefully, the time you invest in it, and we are working with a like a consultancy company that's going to help us with kind of building them out. Kind of on the pathway to, like I said, having this analytics department, which will provide probably more detail and almost more research in terms of and insights into what the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, sure. So just maybe off topic a little bit, Sam, do you have anything to do with like the recruitment side of things at the club, or are you just more sort of post-match, pre-match? Do you have anything in that kind of?
I don't directly. Obviously, I know I have a relationship with the recruitment side, and I have met with them a couple of times just to go through like player profiles, kind of terminology that we use, things we look for, like almost our like game model and how we want to play to kind of give them an idea and show them some video and that kind of stuff, just to give them an idea as to how we view things downstairs or in our office almost, you know what I mean? Just to try and just because they've showed interest and they obviously think it's something useful to understand.
Yeah. So when you say they, and in terms of the recruitment department, is that more like scouts, or is it more like, because obviously you've got to manage the salary cap and things like that. So do you have roles such as like recruitment analysts that kind of more UK clubs are kind of popping up at the moment, or how does it look over there?
Again, that was probably something that needed building out when we arrived. We've got to a stage now. We have a technical director who does a lot of the recruitment side of things and finalising deals, etc. And we then have 2 full-time at the club within the recruitment department, and then I think we're starting to build out like regional scouts, which is something that we didn't have before. Obviously, they are scouts and they do travel to games, but I think a lot of it is still video based.
Yeah.
Again, logistically, in terms of covering any potential signings from LA is more difficult. I think further down the line they go out and watch things, or if there's tournaments where there's going to be, or youth tournaments where there's potentially 2 or 3 of interest, I think they do travel to go and watch. But and they also use the time on the international breaks to maybe go and watch some internationals or that kind of stuff. But it's probably a little bit more different to a to a scout in the UK where you can go and watch a game every 2 to 3 days or whatever. So it is a lot more video based, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing I do want to touch on, Sam, really is the kind of ask you about your work-life balance, and kind of see a lot is said about the amount of hours that an analyst works, especially when the team is playing twice a week. Maybe you don't get that over there, but what's it like over there for you in terms of, have you found it, is it difficult to manage, or have you found it's a bit more relaxed than the UK, or how does that look?
I think it's very similar. I think the nature of the job is always going to be a lot of work to do. Like I said, I'm on my own in terms of working with the first team from an analysis point of view. So I think there is a lot of work to do. There's a lot of games to watch. There's a lot of means to put together. We do go through periods where we play twice a week, and obviously traveling as well. We'll travel. I'll be sat on a plane for 3 or 4 hours to travel to a game. So that time is probably a useful time where we can work. But then it's, like I said, traveling is pretty taxing in terms of how your body feels, and you're around hotels and all that kind of stuff. It's great that you get to go to these great cities, but sometimes it is difficult and it's draining. But in terms of work life, I think I think it is, like I said, relatively similar. I don't think there's too much differences. Like I said, it's the same job. It's just at a different in a different place.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I've seen it.
yeah. I think it is. It's obviously one of them jobs, especially when you're working in elite sport. There's always gonna be something that needs doing, and you've always kind of got to be on hand to react and stuff. So yeah, it does sound very very similar. So kind of let's speak about what you did season just finished then, Sam. So again, you're not the only team in LA. Obviously, you've got LAFC as well, and I believe you played them in the cup as well. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, we lost them in the playoffs in the second round of the playoffs.
And that was like a late goal as well, was it?
Yeah, it was late.
Sounds like you've not got over that yet,
and then they won it. They won MLS Cup.
They did win it, yeah, indeed. So they're obviously a newer team than you. So how? I mean, is the rivalry there like there would be in England? Obviously, two teams in the same city. How does that kind of feel?
I think there is. Obviously, like you said, them being a little bit of a newer team. Well, they've been around for what, 5 years?
Yeah.
And obviously, Galaxy has a history of winning 5 MLS Cups, which no one has done. But yeah, the rivalry is pretty intense. Obviously, and I see it very similar to like a rivalry at home. Obviously, it is like I said, an intense rivalry. I don't think it's too dissimilar to a club like a city at home with two clubs in pretty close proximity. It is a different dynamic in a way, like I said, just because of how new they are and how established the Galaxy is, and maybe over the last few years we've been going through a bit more of a rebuilding process to hopefully build something a little bit sustainable in the future. So it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see what happens next season. Now we feel like we've made good progress in terms of where we were even last year.
Yeah, definitely. So in general then, Sam, in terms of all the clubs that you've come across obviously in the Western Conference, but when you play the other teams, what is every club have an analyst at this stage now?
I don't think, unbelievably, I don't think that every club does have an analyst. And I don't think perhaps people don't operate in a way that we would at home. I think at home we always prioritize what we get live.
Yeah.
I think a lot of clubs here do stuff perhaps retrospectively, and I don't know whether that's because they play more of a role on a match day or how they, again, you only know looking in as to how people operate. So a lot of people are starting to use Speedio, like the more within our game exchange, you see more like automated filming where unless they're using stuff live within the Speedio app, they're probably not using it live, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit delayed if you to be using it on the bench, like it's 2 minutes delay.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think necessarily every club has someone. I think a lot of times people leave and people don't get replaced, or it takes a little bit longer to replace them. But clubs are built out way better than we are in terms of infrastructure, with 2 people at first team level, one with like a second team, and then perhaps 1 or 2 full time at academy. I know a few clubs have kind of reached that. So in that sense, like I said earlier, we want to build it out. Obviously, only if we see value in those positions, but I think it is something that we want to do. Because, like I said, a lot of clubs now are getting closer to what it looks like at home. Maybe not with like 5 analysts at a first team level, but
yeah. No, that's interesting. So obviously, if there's probably people that are listening that would fancy a little crack over there. So there's probably jobs out there. So if you can network and make it happen, it could be achievable. So in terms of LA as well, obviously the World Cup is coming to America, and obviously we're in the World Cup now, but it seems a long way away. But obviously the World Cup's going there in 2026, and it's actually going to LA is one of the venues as well, isn't it? I think so.
Yeah, the SoFi.
The SoFi, yeah. So obviously you may be there still, maybe not. So are you kind of obviously, are you seeing a buzz around the World Cup now? Because from what I hear is that the USA squad is kind of quite young, maybe building up towards that World Cup on home turf. Like, what's the expectations around like this current World Cup? from the Americans over there?
I think there's definitely like an excitement because it hasn't happened for such a long time, and obviously they've done well the last few years in getting to the World Cup. And you go through the team now, and you look at like where everyone plays on a very basic level, like Arsenal, AC Milan, Juventus, like Norwich, Lille, Valencia. Like it's that Leeds. It's definitely like had a shift of like players can go and play in Europe now, and you look at even players that don't play. There's a lot of players that go and play in Europe, which is obviously still a very desirable thing for Americans to go and do. I don't necessarily think that is perhaps everything, because you look at players that are in the you've got players from Nashville and Seattle that are in the US squad on like playing in games alongside those players almost. They almost have like two squads that they've used over the last like 2-3 years to qualify for this World Cup. They almost have like the European squad and then the MLS squad, and a lot of players that play within the MLS that helped them get there aren't even in the squad now because they're using all the European players. So like in terms of like a pool of players to pick from, it's massive, and it's a massive sporting country. I know football probably sits lower down the priority list as compared to others, but it's definitely like on the rise, and the amount of people that play football over here is definitely getting more and more, I think.
Yeah. So give us the again, we spoke about it before we came on, but obviously the USA Wales was the other night. See, what do you make of that, Sam?
The US looked really good first half. I thought it could have been a couple more, to be honest. And then I watched part of the second half, but Wales seemed to work their way back into the game. So, like I said to you, the point for those two was a really good result for England. So I was quite pleased about that.
Definitely. So what's the predict? I've got to ask you for a prediction, Sam. Is how far can England go? Who's going to win it?
After yesterday, I don't want to get excited like everyone else has. But I think especially what's happened today with Argentina, it kind of puts into perspective how good of a result yesterday was for us, and that it's not that easy to turn up in a World Cup and beat a lesser nation, I suppose, because that's something we've always struggled to do before. So I don't know. Anything can happen in the knockout. So we've just got to get there first and then see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you probably didn't watch it'd have been too early for you, wouldn't it? The Argentina game. Did you see any of it? Or
I didn't watch the Argentina game, no, but I got up yesterday to watch England at 5. So.
Yeah. It was crazy. The Saudi Arabia, man, it was a crazy game. Like how because
I watched the highlights actually just before I came on this call. It looked like they had a few more. I know Argentina had a good chance a bit later on, but like Saudi Arabia had a couple of chances.
Yeah, they were just throwing the bodies at everything, and then the game after that was a decent game as well. 0-0.
Mexico.
The Denmark, is it Denmark Tunisia? The one before, before the Mexican game. Yeah, that was decent as well. Perfect. So one thing I do like to ask Sam, as we're kind of getting to the end here, in terms of advice for analysts that are watching. Again, like I said, some people that watch this are maybe still at university and they're looking at the role that you do and what other people do, and they've decided that is a path that they want to kind of take. So what would you say for an aspiring analyst in terms of maybe what put you in good stead, and what would you say would help them out?
Yeah, I think when I left university, I touched on it earlier a little bit, but I went over to New Jersey and coached for like 3 months, and I kind of thought, oh, maybe I could do more coaching or get into coaching, and which is potentially harder or more challenging or more competitive. But then I kind of felt, I was like, no, I think my skill set is more suited to analysis, and I was like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to try and get into an academy or try and do something, even if it's unpaid. And kind of, like I said earlier, I did 3 jobs whilst I was at Chelsea to kind of make that sacrifice.
Yeah.
How I got the Chelsea job was I emailed everyone and spoke to people who I knew people, and then Ben Smith at Chelsea reached out to me and said, "Oh, we have a potential petition," and then you just got to like be keen to learn. And I know it sounds a little cliche and stuff people have said before, but if you do a good job and then a full-time job comes up, like, you're going to be in front of the queue. Clubs don't want to recruit externally because then they have tons of applications and all that kind of stuff. So I think people shouldn't underestimate how valuable it is when you're in a club to make a good impression and do the right things and offer your services, extra hours or whatever needs doing. Because it obviously helps the person in that role, and then they're the person that probably decides who gets recruited for the next job. So I think being willing and showing that this is something you want to do will help you. And I think even the other side of things, just like the personal touches are just as important. I think long gone are the days of analysts away from coaches and interacting less with people. So I think even being conscious of how you interact with people around the building, other members of staff from other departments. People talk, right? If you speak to someone from the medical department and they say, "Oh, who's your intern that works for you?" You say, "Oh, I was chatting with him earlier. He seems a really nice kid." Whatever, however that conversation goes, I think it's still powerful. Obviously, that's not why you speak to people, but I'm just saying to be outgoing and forthcoming with other members of staff whilst staying within your lane around the club, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, no, that is a very important point actually, in terms of, like, if you're going to get a job, you're going to be, working a lot of hours, you're going to be spending a lot of time, and I think how you come across and how you are perceived as well is a big thing. And if you are, putting the work in, working hard, and making good impressions on these people, then yeah, you are definitely more likely to get a job. And the thing you mentioned there, you emailed all the clubs, so you obviously were proactive in trying to find something that you wanted to do, which sounds obvious, but some people don't do it. So the jobs aren't just going to come knocking on your door. You do have to kind of, one, stand out, and then two, kind of go and find them, and then when you do grab something, kind of make the most of it. So yeah, that's testament to kind of that, really. So
I do think trying to be different along that as well. Obviously, like an email with your CV is, people in those positions probably receive hundreds of them. So it's like, it's trying to do it in a different way, or trying to get someone's number, or trying to send them an example of some work you've done, or I don't know, like trying to do something different. And I do strongly believe that if you stick with that, and it might take you 2 years, right? But then you're on a pathway. Then you're in, as long as you continue to do good work. It's just being perseverance and just saying, like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, and again, that kind of making a good impression and doing the work. Obviously, that's obviously what you've done. I mean, your head coach wouldn't have taken you with him to Galaxy if you weren't valuable to him and the rest of the team. So that's obviously proof that does work. So just kind of as we get wrapped up here, Sam, so have you got, I do like to ask, you may not have any, and it doesn't have to be sport related, but do you have any kind of podcasts that you'd like to listen to, any books that you can recommend? And again, doesn't have to be sport, anything. Do you have time to read books these days, Sam, or what's the...
I don't read in season. I try sometimes and I just fall asleep, to be honest. So during the off season, it's usually a good time for me to read stuff. I don't usually read anything specific. I like reading like autobiographies of other people from other sports, or usually within football.
Yeah.
Like I've read Eddie Jones's, Elon Musk's. I find those things a little bit more interesting, and usually a little while to get going, just when they talk about their background and whatever. But then when you get further down, podcast wise, I listen to some of the high performance one. I kind of dip into certain people that I'm more interested in than others. I like Under the Cosh, which is a bit more of a storytelling football one. It's not necessarily a performance one. And I probably browse YouTube more and watch like interviews, or like, like the behind the scenes stuff. I like the England rugby ones. They're usually pretty good. I don't particularly watch rugby, but they do like a series of like I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah,
it's like,
I watched it the other day, actually, the one with the analysts, or at least one of them.
Yeah,
Really
Yeah,
good.
they have like a whole series. I haven't actually watched that one yet. I saw they've done one previous with the analysts, which was interesting. And they usually, again with Eddie Jones, they usually seem to do some like take different stuff from different sports and do just around the environment and all that kind of stuff. They do things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of it really. I don't
Yeah,
nothing
no,
too
that's fine. I
specific
mean,
there.
like the high performance one gets mentioned a lot, but under the costas as well. I love that. Like, that's a big one for. I always watch that. There's
And
something.
I know that's I know it's a little bit silly, and there are sometimes some like valuable stuff within it about like um just like how obviously if you're in an academy environment like ex pros, there's usually a few ex pros around, how they operate, how they think, like how they deal with younger players. They kind of talk about that in the
Yeah,
environment, and I know there's some harsh realities of stories that they tell, but sometimes they're like good insights as to what
yeah,
actually goes on. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Perfect. Well, I've kind of gone through everything I wanted to ask you, Sam. So I really appreciate that. Is there anything else is there anything you want to give a shout out to? Anything you want to bring up before we kind of close it off?
No, that's
No.
all been great.
You
Thanks for your
want to,
time.
you want to get off to the beach, I presume. Is that what you
Not today. It's a bit cold today.
Oh, is it? All right, nice one. Well, listen, Sam, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for chatting. I will catch up with you soon.
Okay. Cheers,
Cheers.
Chris.